This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
Chronic spontaneous urticaria, or chronic hives with no known cause. It's so unpredictable. It's like playing pinball. Itchy, red bumps start on my arm, then my back. Sometimes my legs. Hives come out of nowhere. And it comes and goes. But I just found out about a treatment option at treatmyhives.com. Take that, chronic hives. Learn more at treatmyhives.com.
The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Roger Stone Show. I am your genial host, Roger Stone. Here we talk politics, news, history, style, food, and, well, lots more. This, of course, was the week in which President Donald Trump reversed 40 years of a bipartisan foreign policy of endless foreign war, where our inherent national interests were never actually clear. Policies that included the erosion of our individual civil liberties, giving rise to a surveillance state, secret funding of both domestic and foreign political operations by USAID, uncovered by Elon Musk, and, of course, trillions of dollars of debt based on massive spending, waste, and corruption. But the age of nation building, the age of the United States as the progenitor of endless foreign war is over. Listen to President Trump.
The transformations have been unbelievably remarkable. Before our eyes, a new generation of leaders is transcending the ancient conflicts of tired divisions of the past and forging a future where the Middle East is defined by commerce, not chaos, where it exports technology, not terrorism, and where people of different nations, religions, and creeds are building cities together, not bombing each other out of existence. We don't want that. And it's crucial for the wider world to note this great transformation has not come from Western interventionists or flying people in beautiful planes giving you lectures on how to live and how to govern your own affairs. No, the gleaming marvels of Riyadh and Abu Dhabi were not created by the so-called nation builders, neocons, or liberal nonprofits like those who spent trillions and trillions of dollars failing to develop Kabul, Baghdad, so many other cities. Instead, the birth of a modern Middle East has been brought by the people of the region themselves, the people that are right here, the people that have lived here all their lives, developing your own sovereign countries, pursuing your own unique visions and charting your own destinies in your own way. It's really incredible what you've done. In the end, the so-called nation builders wrecked far more nations than they built, and the interventionists were intervening in complex societies that they did not even understand themselves. They told you how to do it, but they had no idea how to do it themselves. Peace, prosperity, and progress ultimately came not from a radical rejection of your heritage, but rather from embracing your national traditions and embracing that same heritage that you love so dearly.
Never mind the Great Reset. This is the Trump reset in the Middle East. This is actually the official birth of the Trump doctrine. This is a doctrine that puts America first. Not only does the president lay the groundwork for a more peaceful world, but he also lays the groundwork for far greater prosperity here in the United States. Returning yesterday from the Middle East, he brought with him a $1 trillion commitment to invest in the United States from Saudi Arabia, a $1.4 trillion commitment to invest in the United States from United Arab Emirates, UAE, and a $200 million deal from the Middle East to buy U.S. airliners. It is indeed a new day of prosperity. Now, some have criticized the president because the Saudis have given the United States government a $400 million aircraft. This is not a gift for President Donald Trump personally. Air Force One is 40 years old. It is obsolete. It is time to put it in mothballs. Perhaps it will ultimately go to the Trump Presidential Library. But this is not a gift to Donald Trump personally. Turns out that Bill Clinton got a $16 million helicopter, but he didn't give it to the government. He took it personally. Ultimately, ownership was transferred to the Clinton Foundation, and he still uses it. We don't hear any Democrats complaining about that. Meanwhile, John Brennan, the former CIA director, is upset because Donald Trump's appointee as the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, has begun cleaning house. Yes, she is terminating people who she has caught leaking classified information. In those cases, she has sent criminal referrals over to the DOJ. In other instances, she has fired people who are disloyal and who were working against the president's First America First policies. Let's listen to John Brennan.
This whole thing just makes me livid. It's appalling and outrageous and demonstrates why Tulsi Gabbard never should have been confirmed as Director of National Intelligence.
Now this is an absurd idea. If there's anybody who should never have been confirmed as a Director of Central Intelligence, it would be John Brennan. First of all, he is an admitted communist. He admitted in a lie detector test prior to his confirmation that he had been a member of the party and supported their presidential candidate in 4 national elections. Secondarily, he is the man who, as the CIA station chief in Saudi Arabia, approved the visa for 4 of the hijackers who attacked America on 9/11. John Brennan was also caught spying on a Senate committee that was investigating his illegal use of torture. And of course, he is the man who orchestrated the Russian collusion hoax. That, of course, is the greatest single abuse of power in American political history. It is nothing less than the use of the full authority of the U.S. government and the incredible capability of our intelligence agencies utilizing 2 pieces of evidence that John Brennan himself knew were fabricated, the so-called Steele dossier, paid for by Hillary Clinton, that alleged that Donald Trump, as a private businessman, had frolicked with Russian prostitutes in Moscow, a fraud completely debunked, and the false claim that the Russians had conducted an online hack of the Democrat National Committee and lagged that information through the Trump campaign to WikiLeaks, a claim that was central in my own Soviet-style show trial, a claim for which the government never produced any actual evidence whatsoever. So John Brennan, of course, more recently is among the 51 former or current national security, national intelligence figures who insisted that Hunter Biden's laptop had all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation. It seems that Mr. Brennan is now even out there defending FBI Director James Comey. Listen to this.
Throughout my career, I've never heard 86 be used for any type of intent to kill or assassinate someone. 86 is, you just discard something. You just, ignore it, or it's not something that Jim Comey would have been advocating in terms of any type of violence. And again, he took down the post. I think was the right thing to do. But again, it's so unfortunate that individuals, including, public officials, have just tried to fan the fires here and just bring in increasing sort of anger against Jim Comey.
I guess John Brennan's never been to Brooklyn, because everybody knows what it means when someone is 86, or he's never been to Atlantic City. Again, an apologist for the deep state. If you're just tuning in, this is the Roger Stone Show here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. We have a very full show for you today, including a discussion of the big, beautiful tax cut bill that seems to be stalled on Capitol Hill. That's with Congressman Jimmy Patronis, the newest member of Congress. Whatever you do, please don't touch that dial, because we'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel or that white chocolate mocha. Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Well, with the release of Special Counsel Robert Hur's actual audio recording of his interview with President Joe Biden regarding Biden's holding and having classified documents that he had obtained as a U.S. Senator and Vice President, and therefore had no legal authority to either have or hold on to, and the halting performance by Biden, what almost every American had already figured out, is abundantly clear that Joe Biden was a man in steep mental decline. Perhaps it was the shaking hands with not existent people, his inability to figure out how to get off the stage or which direction to go, his reading of the stage directions, stop here or long pause, or his inability to finish a thought or a sentence, which neurologists told me was a certain sign of onset dementia. The Democrats and those in the media knew the entire time, but now they're pretending like they just found it out. This audio proves it, but the worst of them all is Jake Tapper, because Jake Tapper, you see, now has a book in which he breaks the stunning news that the media, himself included, were unaware that Joe Biden was in steep mental decline. In fact, when Lara Trump, the president's daughter-in-law, raised this legitimate issue during the campaign, Jake Tapper put her down kind of harshly. Listen to this.
Every time he comes on stage or they turn to him, I'm like, Joe, can you get it out? Let's get the words out, Joe. You kind of feel bad for him.
How do you think it makes little kids with stutters feel when they see you make a comment like that?
First and foremost, I had no idea that Joe Biden ever suffered from a stutter. I think what we see on stage with Joe Biden, Jake, is very clearly a cognitive decline. Okay. That's what I'm referring to. It makes me uncomfortable to watch somebody on stage search for
so amazing. It's so amazing to me that
try and figure out an answer.
A cognitive decline.
Well, when you're trying to tell me that what I was suggesting was
I think that you were mocking his stutter. Yeah, I think you were mocking his stutter, and I think you have absolutely no standing to diagnose somebody's cognitive decline. I would think that somebody in the Trump family would be more sensitive to people who do not have medical licenses diagnosing politicians from afar. Plenty of people have diagnosed your father from afar, and I'm sure it offends you. Your father-in-law from afar. I'm sure it offends you. You don't have any standing to say.
I'm not diagnosing him. What I'm saying, Jake,
you just talked about a cognitive decline.
That Joe Biden
I have one last question for you, Laura. You can't
times on stage, and it's very concerning to a lot of people that this could be the leader of the free world. Okay. That is all I'm saying. I genuinely feel sorry for Joe Biden.
I appreciate it.
Just to be very clear, Jake Tapper is now out trying to cash in with a book in which he claims that he didn't realize that Joe Biden was in steep cognitive mental decline, which we all know is not true. In fact, at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, they actually gave an award to a reporter from Axios who had the courage to write what every single person in the room knew. Amazing. Now, when I was pardoned after a witch hunt, a Soviet-style show trial featuring a hateful, biased judge who had hid exculpatory evidence from my defense attorneys, a completely a corrupted jury forewoman who insisted during jury selection and the trial that she was unfamiliar with me and unfamiliar with my case, when in fact she had been attacking me regarding the very case in which she was later chosen as a juror on both Twitter and Facebook for an entire 19 months before my trial. But she had those posts on her social media on a private setting so that they could not be seen in due diligence looking into the jurors, as well as a rigged juror that had not a single non-Democrat partisan. The president signed my pardon personally with a pen. But it turns out that Joe Biden's pardons, both of his political cronies like Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi and Liz Cheney, as well as the vicious criminals such as murderers and unrepentant murderers and drug dealers that he inexplicably gave pardons to, well, those were signed with an auto pen. President Trump said this yesterday: whoever had control of the auto pen is looking to be a bigger and bigger scandal by the minute. It is a major part of the real crime that the presidential election in 2020 was rigged and stolen. Millions and millions of people knew that, but the radical left Democrats waged a campaign of inoculation and innocence unlike had ever been seen before. This is why the unselect committee of political thugs who were given full and complete pardons by the person who wielded the now illegally used auto pen deleted and destroyed all evidence and information from their corrupt and vicious witch hunt against me and many other people whose lives were completely shattered and destroyed by this historically criminal event. Remember, it all began with dirty cop James Comey, Obama, a hapless and cognitively impaired sleepy Joe Biden, and my now famous accusation turned out to be correct. They spied on my campaign. Don't go away, folks. We'll be right back with the Roger Stone Show. Coming up next, we have, Congressman Jimmy Patronis is going to talk to us about the big, beautiful bill, the tax cut bill. It seems to be stalled on Capitol Hill. We're going to talk about that with the newest member of Congress when we come back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. Joining me now is the newest member of Congress, elected in a special election in the 1st District of Florida, Jimmy Patronis, who served as the Chief Financial Officer for the state of Florida, where he gained a reputation as a dogged protector of Florida's taxpayers, is now a member of Congress and has joined the America First Brigade in the U.S. House of Representatives. Jimmy Patronis, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Roger, it's an honor to join you. Thank you.
So let me ask you, how do you like being a member of Congress? It's very different. You had an executive position previously. Now you're in a legislative position. You're one of 536 members. It has to be quite different.
Yeah, look, I did some time in the Florida legislature, 8 years in the Florida House, and it's a part-time legislature. All the mechanics are the same. There's just a lot more bodies to work with. And look, it's nice when in Florida we had a pretty significant margin to work with. Here, with as tight as things are, bringing, bills in for a landing it's a lot tougher, especially when you've got so many states that have different fiscal positions that they're in, and it's doing what they're doing, members of Congress representing their states. So there's definitely been some infighting amongst Republicans on how to bring in this one critical, big, beautiful bill.
Yeah, I want to get to that in just a minute. I like Speaker Johnson. I think he has a very, very, very difficult job. People like to attack him, like to criticize him, but he has to get a majority of his caucus to vote for anything, and he's got a relatively diverse caucus. There are some establishment Republicans who don't want to rock the boat. There are others who really favor radical reform, and he still has to get a majority. So I have great sympathy for the Speaker. Sometimes I wish he'd be a little tougher, but by and large, I think he's a good man. I think he's doing the best he can with a diverse caucus. You make reference to the big, beautiful bill, which is a bill that focuses on the president's tax priorities. First and foremost, of course, is the extension of the 2017 Trump tax cuts. Now, the bill aims to make permanent the individual tax cuts from 2017, which are set to expire after this year. This includes lower income tax rates across all brackets, an increased standard deduction, and other provisions. Now, the truth is that the extension is estimated to cost around $3.8 trillion to $4 trillion over 10 years. But if you are not for the extension of the Trump tax cuts, you are de facto, therefore, favoring the largest tax increase in American history, no?
You're 100% accurate. And so you've got members that make really good arguments about provisions in the big, beautiful bill that they'd like to see implemented. And it's hard, but the alternative is just not acceptable. So, I mean, and then we still have to hope that we get a cooperative Senate to take up what we're going to do. And look, I love the Senate, but there's members of the United States Senate, and their disposition is, I was here before Donald Trump, and I'm going to be here after Donald Trump. And they just don't quite have the type of urgency that the House does, being that they're on the ballot every 2 years.
The big, beautiful bill, of course, also includes ending the tax on tips, which I think was a crucial policy maneuver and proposal in the 2024 election. I think it single-handedly tipped Nevada, a swing state, to us. My sister is a member of the Culinary Workers Union, which is what they call the hotel and bartenders union in Atlantic City. She tells me that while her shop stewards were telling her to vote for the Democrats, that she and all of the other women that she worked with were voting for President Trump on the basis of his no tax on tip proposal. Also, the big, beautiful bill includes no tax on overtime pay, removes federal income tax on overtime wages aimed at supporting workers who earn additional income through extra hours. It also includes no tax on Social Security benefits for seniors. To me, this is a no-brainer. It exempts Social Security benefits from federal income tax, providing relief for retirees. It also increases the state and local tax SALT deduction cap. Now, we're going to talk about in a second. It raises the SALT deduction cap from $10,000 to $30,000 for joint filers and $15,000 for individuals. Now, this seems to me to be somewhat unfair to people in lower tax states like Florida, and to reward people in high tax states like New York. And there, I guess, lies the rub.
You're exactly right. You know, Daddy used to say, if you want to get somebody's attention, you get in their pocketbook. And that's exactly what President Trump did this past election cycle. He listened to the voters as he traveled all around the country in that campaign, and, you know, knew that we had to take this election as serious as it was, because this is the future for our children and our grandchildren. So, I mean, those issues are really what motivated so many, at least in my opinion, non-typical voters to get out and support President Trump. But now we've got to deliver. And to your point regarding the SALT issue, you know, this is a rub as states that live within their means, like Florida. We've been the beneficiary of 400,000 new net Floridians last year alone. And what you've got is as I talk to people, I was in the restaurant business for 30 years, so I'm always trying to figure out, how do I get a repeat customer? I can't unprogram myself. And I ask folks that have moved to the state of Florida, you know, why did you move here? And, you know, usually I'm thinking it's the snow, it's their kids are down here, their grandkids are down here at work. Every single one I've talked to always points to taxes as their primary reason. They want to hold on to more of their money, and they're making that decision with their feet, and they're leaving the states where there is no state income tax and where they can keep more of their money.
Yeah, the big, beautiful bill also includes an increased child tax credit, temporarily increases the child tax credit by $500, bringing it up to $2,500 per child to support families. Increased estate tax exemption, raises the estate tax exemption to $15 million, reducing the tax burden on larger inheritances. No taxes on car loan interest for American-made cars. This is ingenious, in my opinion. Provides a deduction for interest on car loans for vehicles manufactured here in the United States, which of course encourages domestic production, supporting buyers. 100% expenses for U.S. investors, allows businesses to fully deduct the cost of certain investments in the year they are made, which of course promotes economic growth. And tax cuts, of course, for American-made products. Once again, putting America first by introducing tax incentives for products manufactured in this country. It also, by the way, closes various tax loopholes, ends tax breaks for billionaire sports team owners, and closes the carried interest loophole, which benefits high-income investors, to offset some costs of the tax cuts. The other key point here is the total tax cuts are estimated to range from $4.1 trillion to over $5 billion. But those, of course, are static numbers. The truth is, and anyone who's honest knows this, that every time we have cut taxes across the board, whether it was under Donald Trump, whether it was under Ronald Reagan, whether it was under John F. Kennedy, we have seen a sharp spike in federal revenues. Our inflation is not caused, our deficits are not caused by the fact that the American people are undertaxed. Our deficits and inflation are caused by the fact that we spend too much. When we come back, I'm going to talk to Jimmy Patronis, the newest member of Congress, about that issue and how we get federal spending under control. If you're just tuning in, this is the Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Networks, and we're talking to Jimmy Patronis, the former chief financial officer for the state of Florida and the newest minted member of the Republican caucus, who is, I can tell you, a bulldog fighter for the taxpayers, a man who takes the America First agenda extremely seriously, the kind of guy you would want fighting for you in Congress. We'll be right back with more of Jimmy Patronis. Whatever you do, please don't touch that dial.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. President Donald Trump has agreed to negotiate with Iran, but he's insisting the Iranians cannot have a program to enrich uranium or build nuclear weapons. Former U.S. Senator from New Jersey, Bob Torricelli, a harsh critic of the Iranian regime and a vocal supporter of Iranian resistance, joins us to talk about that. You're not going to want to miss that. We return now to our interview with my friend Jimmy Patronis, the newest member of Congress, recently elected to fill the seat of my friend Congressman Matt Gaetz, who resigned, leaving a vacancy in Florida's 1st District. Jimmy Patronis, I can tell you firsthand, is a dogged fighter for the American taxpayers, and I sleep better at night knowing that he's in the House. He's not one of these go-along, get-along politicians interested only in re-election. He is a man who stands up for the America First agenda, and we're honored to have him today. Jimmy, on Friday, the big, beautiful bill failed to leave the Budget Committee, where fiscal hawks snubbed the bill, a setback for the Speaker and leadership. The House Budget Committee voted 16-21 against advancing the fiscal year reconciliation bill, also known as the Big, Beautiful Bill, with 5 of your colleagues, Ralph Norman, Chip Roy, Josh Breachin, Andrew Clyde, and Lloyd Smucker, joining all the Democrats in opposition. All good men, I might add. The bill faced resistance from some conservative dissenters over issues like the timeline for repealing the green energy tax credits, the Medicaid work requirement delays, and the lack of a full CBO score. I kind of wonder whether the CBO is outdated and whether we really need their score. But as you know, one member switched their vote so that therefore the proposal can be reconsidered by the House and by the committee. What's going to happen here, Jimmy?
So, the one thing I think that a lot of there's a little bit of expansion states versus non-expansion states fight here also. And so I know in Florida, we would like to see the work requirement kick in. And so the thought is, all right, well, we can try to get the work requirement implemented by 2029. And so myself, a number of us feel like that's not soon enough. Every year we force a work requirement to kick in sooner. That's hundreds of millions, maybe even billions of dollars of savings that we can realize and save the taxpayers. And, I'm a big believer that the citizens of Congressional District 1 and the citizens of the state of Florida, that matter, spend their money better than Washington does. So this is one way we can realize some savings. I know there's those out there that say that, well, the reason why we're not forcing the work requirement in for 4 years is because we've got to allow those states to figure out how to transition to do it. And you know what? In Florida, our attitude is that's not our problem. And so that's a little bit of a rub that Florida congressmen have. And it's not just Florida. This is also kind of a lot of where these same members who voted against it in the budget committee this week.
So what are you hearing from the Trump base on the bill? Because I'm hearing a mix of things. I'm hearing some concerns over the growing of the defense budget, raising the debt ceiling. But on the other hand, a lot of the president's supporters agree with when he says we have to dig ourselves out of this hole first, and that revenues coming in from his tariff implementation, as well as revenues coming in just from tax cuts, which is a historically proven. Sorry, Robert Reich. I went to high school with Robert Reich, by the way. He was wrong then. He's wrong now. You remember him? He was the labor secretary under. I remember him. Insists that the deficit was caused by tax cuts on working families. Also, these are the same folks who keep insisting that Trump wants to cut taxes on the wealthy, on the billionaires, when we both know these tax cuts are across the board. But what are you hearing back home about the big, beautiful bill?
So here's part of the challenge. As President Trump campaigned on these different issues, the no tax on tips, Social Security, overtime, just like anybody who's starting out a business for the first time, a lot of times you have to borrow money. You have to go into debt in order to turn the business into a profitable enterprise. This is no different than what the president's trying to do. The policies that he's advocating for are going to need some breathing room. Look, I'm not thrilled about raising the debt ceiling, but I know that if we want to give these policies that the president is pushing for to have a chance, he's going to need some bandwidth to do it. So, this is part of an explanation that we have with our constituents. And ultimately, the president won. It wasn't just a small win. It was an unquestionable win this past November. People were fed up with what they had the previous 4 years with the auto pen running our country. And they were ready for a real leader to step back into the White House and take over and make us respectable again. So yeah, we've got to give some real trust to the president. And the good thing about it is when I got elected in the special election, I tell people, I said, I don't know if Jimmy got elected, but I know Donald Trump got reelected in that special election.
Well, I think your election was a reaffirmation. They said, by the way, that the other special election in Florida, I think it's the 6th district, Mike Walsh's district, they kept telling us that was going to be close, that we might even lose, and the Republican candidate there ended up winning, I think, slightly bigger than you did, which so much for that argument. I have yet to meet a single person, any place, who tells me they regret voting for Donald Trump. Not one. Not a single one.
That's right. That's right. And look, the president, I just look at what he did with tariffs to start. A lot of people question. I said, when the president goes as broad as he did with the reciprocal tariffs, we don't have all the details yet because that's the art of negotiation. But, how many countries just came to the president and blindly said, you know what, mercy, I don't even want to negotiate with you because our relationship with the U.S. economy is too important. This is what we're willing to do right now. And it's only a matter of time before we're going to see the fruit from those actions that the president has gone out and negotiated.
I completely agree. I was very proud of him watching him in the Middle East. First of all, his energy and his stamina just astounds me. I mean, he's 78 years old, I believe. I'm 72. I'm exhausted just doing this show, and he just keeps plowing ahead. I mean, it's amazing. I work for 3 presidents. He is the hardest working president that I have ever seen or been associated with. His energy level, his stamina, you can see he's having the time of his life, by the way. He's a happy warrior. He's happy winning for America. All right, I'm afraid we have to leave it there. I want to thank our guest, Jimmy Patronis, a newly minted Republican member of Congress. Coming up on the other side, former U.S. Senator from New Jersey, Bob Torricelli, a Democrat, longtime critic of the Iranian regime, and also a supporter of the Iranian resistance, joins us to talk about that issue and the president's trip to the Middle East. So whatever you do, don't go away. We'll be right back on The Roger Stone Show.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. Joining me now is former New Jersey Senator Bob Torricelli, who served in both the House and the Senate. Bob Torricelli earned degrees both from Rutgers University and Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. During his time in Congress, he authored the Cuban Democracy Act of 1992. He is a consistent opponent of authoritarian regimes, not just in the Middle East, but also in our own hemisphere. And I am delighted that he can join us today. Senator, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Thank you, Roger. Good afternoon, and thanks for having me.
So before we get into international politics, we learned through Elon Musk's Doge program that Yale and Harvard, Brown University, and other universities who have these massive endowments have been getting tens of $millions of dollars from U.S. taxpayers. And you had a great idea as to how this situation should be addressed. And then days later, I saw the administration doing precisely what you had recommended. Tell us about that.
Well, I think, Roger, there should be some national debate about the ability of institutions, especially universities, to accumulate not millions, but billions of dollars of endowments, pay no taxes, while availing themselves of federally financed student loans and government subsidies. They accumulate this money, but seem loath to spend it on public purposes or on their own students. I think it's a policy that needs to be revisited. Under what I'm understanding to be President Trump's proposal for the new tax bill, at a certain level of endowment, I think he's proposing $200 billion, a tax would apply, not a large tax, but I think he's talking about 2% on the endowments over that level. I actually believe it should go further. If a university like my own alma mater of Harvard accumulates hundreds of billions of dollars, but still charges students $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 in tuition and forces them on to government-backed student loans, there's a problem. And I think they should have a choice. Use the money, subsidize your students, use it for your own research, notwithstanding the government, or contribute to the public treasury. It appears to me we're going to have that debate at long last.
All right. Thank you for that. Let's move right into the news of the last 10 days. What is your reaction to the president's trip to the Middle East and the various announcements there? Obviously, he knows how to do business. $1 trillion in investment from the Saudis, 1.4 from the UAE. He announces a $200 billion deal with Qatar. What is your thinking?
Well, we have since the Second World War been in this economic strategy where we have massive trade deficits, and the dollars are recycled back into the United States by buying government bonds. And we've been content that somehow that reached an equilibrium. It didn't. Those dollars do not go for naught. They are enormous leverage over the United States and the American Treasury. That is not a balanced trade relationship. There are two ways to balance our trade deficits with our appetite for foreign goods. People either buy American products, which they should, and clearly the Trump administration is working on that by imposing tariffs until we enter into balanced trade relationships, or direct investment in the United States. Take those dollar surpluses that nations are accumulating and put them into the United States to build our own country, create jobs here. We have witnessed in the last several months the first part of that strategy, requiring countries to have purchase of American goods for balance. What you saw last week is the other part of the strategy, requiring them to start investing in the United States. And those are large numbers. If you're approaching $1 trillion worth of Saudi investment in plant and equipment in America, you're going to have an impact.
I know that you are a skeptic when it comes to honest negotiations with the Iranian regime. You and I think agreed that I saw very slightly different statements from the president, the vice president, and his special negotiator, Steve Witkoff. The president, I think, has made it pretty clear that while he may be open to letting the Iranian regime have nuclear power for the purpose of producing electricity, that he is not willing to let them have enriched uranium with which they could develop nuclear weapons. That seems to me to be a very difficult negotiation. How do you think that will play out?
I think it's difficult, and as you suggested, it's hard to know what to believe because there are different statements coming out of the administration. It could be a good policy. It could not be. The Iranians have one nuclear power plant. They do not need to be enriching uranium. They do not need to be even processing uranium. Economics would dictate, good business would dictate, is you have one plant. Indeed, if you were to quadruple it and someday have 4, if you were to have 10, it would not make economic sense to be producing uranium domestically. You'd be importing it. It's smarter, it's cheaper, it's good business. Which raises the question, if you're going to have one plant or someday have 10, why are you choosing to enrich uranium at all? It would raise suspicions that the real intent isn't nuclear power at all. It's to have the option, if not now, at some point, of a nuclear weapon. In my judgment, the right policy for the administration would be dismantle your nuclear weapons program, and if you're telling the truth that you want a civilian nuclear power project, enter into a long-term agreement, even with the Russians. We do. We buy from the Russians. Enter a long-term agreement and import the material from them or someone.
Do you think that the sanctions that President Trump put in place on Iran during his first term were effective?
I think we're only actually having a discussion with Iranians about potentially dismantling their nuclear power systems because of the sanctions in the first Trump administration. They were probably the most effective sanctions on a foreign rogue regime in history. More than South Africa, more than on Rhodesia, more than on Russia. They were almost airtight, but for some oil escaping, particularly to China. But they did the trick. They crippled the regime. They made it difficult for the regime to send money to Hezbollah and Hamas and other terrorist organizations, and it fomented internal dissent. I genuinely regret in the Biden administration, and I say it with regret because I remain, and will always be a Democrat, the release of billions of dollars of sanctioned funds that were held by the United States and other nations returning those monies to Iran relieved economic pressure internally, and it certainly contributed to the ability of the Iranian regime to fund terrorist organizations, including Hamas and Hezbollah, around the globe. It was a profound mistake, but it's a reality. Now the question is there enough economic pressure on the regime, and I think there probably is, to force them back to the table and dismantle their weapons capability.
If you're just tuning in, we're talking to Senator Bob Torricelli of New Jersey. You're listening to The Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC, and we'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. Coming up shortly, Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, the chairwoman of the House Task Force on the Declassification of Classified Documents regarding the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and Dr. Martin Luther King. You're not going to want to miss this because she is going to bring us news. She is earning her mark in the House as a real fighter for her unapologetic style and her bold legislative reform agenda. We're very pleased to have her. We are continuing our conversation with Senator Bob Torricelli of New Jersey. Bob, let me ask you this. The president announced when he was in the Middle East that he was lifting sanctions on Syria, and he was suggesting that Syria may someday join the Abraham Accords. Let me hear your views on this.
Well, I suspect we're a long way from them joining the Abraham Accords, given the nature of their government and what is a deepening rift, not a lessening rift, with some of the Arab nations because of events in Gaza. I think as a practical matter, it's no matter how hard the president may try, and I admire him for trying, bridging that gap as long as the Israeli offensive remains in Gaza is probably impossible. For an Arab government now to reapproach with Israel would be at enormous internal political risk. The other part of your question, of course, is approaching the Syrian government the right thing to do. I think it has risk. We really don't know a lot about who is in this coalition. We don't know a lot about the leadership. The current president is a former Al-Qaeda member. That in and of itself raises suspicions. On the other hand, even though it's a risk, I think the president's probably done the right thing. Trying to bring Syria into the orbit of moderate Arab states to try to at least moderate their behavior with Israel, to open communication, to keep them from radicalizing further. While it has risks, I think is undoubtedly worth a try. I think the president did the right thing.
It never hurts to talk. I agree with that, but we cannot ignore the mass slaughter of Christians in Syria, and we cannot ignore the status of the regime there and the radical nature of the regime. I was not a big fan of Assad, needless to say. On the other hand, as we saw in Libya, what came after the toppling of Gaddafi was far, far worse. I pray that we are not seeing the same thing in Syria, but I think perhaps, that we are. All politics is local, therefore I cannot resist. But before we get there, my wife, as you know, is a proud Cuban American, and she suggested that I ask you this question. What should the administration's current policy towards the Cuban regime be?
Well, I have spent a lot of my life in dealing with American policy towards Cuba, and I have to start by admitting we were fundamentally wrong. Most of us who were involved in the Democrat-Republican coalition to reform Cuba believed that when Castro died and his brother Raul left the scene, that somehow the regime would start to moderate. It didn't. It hasn't. There's no reason to believe that it will. It remains hostile. It is not fomenting revolution in the hemisphere the way it did, but I don't think that's a change of philosophy. It's simply because of their desperate economic circumstances, which to me is the best argument for keeping the current economic sanctions in place until there's a change of government. It doesn't have to become a Jeffersonian democracy. They can choose their own form of government as long as it respects human rights and is not aggressive towards the United States, our interests, or other governments in the hemisphere. But there's no reason to believe at the moment that we're any closer to that goal. So I don't see any reason for the United States to change its policies.
Yeah, in fact, I would make the case that previously they were a client state of Russia. Today they appear to me to be a client state of China. We know that China has a sophisticated spy station in Cuba. We also know that they have missiles in Cuba. Now, technically they're defensive missiles, but military experts tell me with a few simple changes, they could become offensive missiles. And, of course, there are no civil liberties. There are no religious rights. There are no free speech. This is a police state, a vicious police state. And the hoped-for liberalization post-Castro has not taken place. So I agree with you. I think the sanctions are absolutely necessary. All right, let's go to the Garden State very quickly. You have hot Republican primary and Democrat primary. Well, I saw that President Donald Trump endorsed Jack Ciattarelli for the Republican nomination. I think the Republicans, the president's endorsement in a primary is determinative. I think Ciattarelli will now win this primary. Thought he was going to win previously, but now with the imprimatur of Donald Trump, I am certain of it. What's your outlook for the Democrat nomination? I'm not asking you to endorse anybody. I'm just asking for your analysis.
Well, almost from the beginning, Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill has maintained a lead. It frankly has surprised me that her lead has either maintained or strengthened in recent weeks, because I thought there have been strong challenges on the far left from Mayor Ras Baraka and a little more centrist from Mayor Fulop. And Steve Sweeney maintains has a strong base in southern New Jersey. I've expected the race to tighten. As you know, the primary rules in New Jersey went through a historic change in the last year. The ability of county organizations to endorse a candidate and give them favorable ballot position, which almost always assured that the party choice would win the nomination. That was ended by the federal courts. These candidates are all now listed in the same ballot, and I think we all thought that meant that the candidate primarily endorsed by the party wouldn't have this advantage. But Mikey Sherrill is proving us wrong. She's a strong contender with a lead.
All right, I want to thank my guest, former Senator Bob Torricelli of New Jersey, for joining us today on the Roger Stone Show. Don't go away. We'll be right back with Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. Joining me now is Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna. She is a rising, influential conservative voice in the U.S. House of Representatives. She is known for her unapologetic style and her bold agenda. She has emerged as a firebrand, a fighter, and a reformer. First elected in 2022, she quickly gained national attention by sponsoring the resolution to censure Congressman Adam Schiff, which passed the House. In 2025, she was appointed to lead the House Oversight Task Force, focused on the declassifying of the federal documents regarding the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and Dr. Martin Luther King. We are very proud to have her with us today. Congresswoman, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Hey, Roger. Thank you so much for having me on.
You announced just days ago that you were sponsoring the American Privacy Restoration Act to fully repeal the Patriot Act and end the surveillance state and restore the Fourth Amendment for U.S. citizens. I think this is one of the boldest and most courageous actions I have seen. I think we both recognize the horrific abuses that have resulted from the Patriot Act. First of all, they told us it was temporary, that it would be used to keep Islamic terrorists and others who would do us harm in check, but the Congress has routinely rubber-stamped them, and it has been used as an excuse for warrantless surveillance of Americans. It also authorizes indefinite secret detention of American citizens. Tell us about your legislation.
Yeah, so I'm actually really glad that you brought that up, because a lot of people, when this initially came out, and by people I mean, far leftists, I really honestly think they're bots, Roger. They're trying to say that everything that you just stated was a conspiracy theory, and the fact is it's not, okay? What the Patriot Act did was it basically used the terrible events of 9/11, and it took the American people's civil liberties and freedom. And so where in previous Congresses, I think a lot of people were afraid to touch this sacred cow, the Patriot Act. This Congress, because of such slim majorities, and then also to, I believe, a changing in the actual demographic of members of Congress, not only have we had both Democrats and Republicans co-sponsor the repeal of the Patriot Act, but people are willing to have the conversations. This also goes into Section 702 in FISA. And what I can tell you is, if the American people don't realize by now that they can't just blindly trust their government, I don't know what else will wake them up. But what I can tell you, Roger, is with everything that happened to President Trump and to the American people during the 2020 election cycle and onward, and where we really saw what was happening with the collaboration of the intelligence agencies, social media, and then, as you know, the FBI labeling American domestic terrorists if they were going to church, if they didn't agree with abortion, whatever it might have been. That is exactly what I am saying is wrong, and the reason why we do need to repeal and, frankly, get rid of the Patriot Act is because it enables government too much. And, frankly, we have all the winds in our sail right now with President Trump and the appointees, but there's always new administrations that come in, and so now is the time to act and to correct the wrongs of the past.
I could not agree more. I think this is very bold on your part and a true act of leadership. I'm curious to know your view on Real ID. I have concerns about Real ID. I understand this, again, passed initially in the wake of 9/11. And it sounds great when you say, well, we're going to use this government-issued ID, which you will need to board an airplane, by the way, to ensure that those who aren't eligible to vote don't vote, and those who shouldn't be eligible to get Social Security benefits don't get them. That sounds great, but the government, to me, they always overreach, and I fear the building of a biometric database on every American and eventually moving towards social credit scores. Call me a conspiracy theorist if you must, but I think we could have the same kind of abuses we've had under the Patriot Act under the Real ID program. What say you?
Yeah, I actually had sent a letter prior to its implementation on the 7th of May to Kristi Noem at DHS, asking for them to delay the implementation. Not just that, I mean, I outlined in the letter my same privacy concerns. And again, this goes into people, again, blindly trust government. But look at what's happened in the past. And if you don't think that that's not possible, just look at what China's been doing. And I really do believe what happened with some of the draconian measures during COVID-19 was kind of a test bed on how far they could push and how much people would push back with the overreach of big government. And if this doesn't tick you off, a lot of the policies that came out even with COVID, Congress was exempt from, where the American people were forced to comply. So again, you'll see these carve-outs for members or people that are in positions of power, while the general population has to adhere and conform. And so, yes, I do have the same obvious privacy concerns there. I would also say, too, this kind of branches out into some of the things that Snowden actually had addressed. And so, look, they do use these types of bills, whether it's the Patriot Act, whether it's FISA, Section 702, to dragnet and collect on the American people under the current Patriot Act. You can go to an internet provider or a cell phone provider. They can provide a warrant. They won't even have to notify you that you are under observation or they're collecting on you. And you can look even into what happened during January 6th, where they dragnetted people's cell phones, where people even just in the vicinity of the Capitol actually were, knocked on by the FBI. And so these are, again, why we are trying to reform the way that we are. Lest
anyone think that Congresswoman Luna is just a knee-jerk conservative, she championed a bipartisan effort to allow proxy voting for new parents in Congress, securing enough support to at least force a vote on the House floor, despite opposition from her own party. This initiative led to her resignation from the House Freedom Caucus, citing a breakdown in mutual respect and as a matter of principle. Congresswoman Luna is a conservative with a heart. I want to turn to the massive job of the oversight involving President Trump's historic order that the National Archives make public all of the classified data regarding the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and Dr. Martin Luther King. I have said and written from the beginning that while I applaud the president's efforts, that I thought that perhaps his order was too narrowly drawn, and that there were deep state actors still in the government, in the Central Intelligence Agency and the other intelligence agencies and other branches of the government who would hold back data. And in fact, a proof of this is the fact that, well, the House Select Committee on Assassinations in the late 70s conducted an extensive investigation. Their final report insisted that organized crime played a very extensive role in President Kennedy's assassination, yet none of the documents we've seen thus far document that. It seems to me we need to find the Carlos Marcello audio recordings from the Camtex sting operation, which are currently sealed. I believe they're in control of the 5th Judicial Circuit in New Orleans, for example. But you have been dogged in seeking those things that are obviously missing. Most importantly, the NBC video. NBC also has the Walter Sheridan films. Walter Sheridan was an investigator who worked for Senator Robert Kennedy. We're very interested in what his final report shows. And then, in addition, I wish that Caroline Kennedy would release the Manchester audio interviews with her mother, Jacqueline Kennedy, would give us some idea of who Jackie Kennedy thought murdered her husband. She has, unfortunately, not done that. I know you have some very revelatory hearings coming up. Tell us what we can expect next week.
Yeah, so next week we actually have some incredible witnesses. We have Abraham Bolden, who was actually a former Secret Service agent in Chicago. And he was actually most notably recently pardoned by Biden, and I believe that he was set up based on the information that he had presented that potentially had implicated that the Secret Service either knowingly or intentionally mishandled the security of the president in Chicago, which would have allowed for initial assassination attempt. A lot of people don't know that before President Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, he was also in Chicago and in Tampa, actually. And there's some very suspect things happening there. We also have Dan Hardway, Judge Tunheim, Dr. Don Curtis, and then someone that you had referenced, Doug Horne. So these are all incredible witnesses. A lot of people have asked me, why do you care so much about Kennedy? Well, first and foremost, exactly what you said, Roger. You do have this aspect of the intelligence agency and community. Just because we have new appointees in a new administration does not mean that they will try to stonewall or refuse handing over information. And as of right now, actually, we have 5 documents still outstanding, one notably being the Joanides file that actually both Tulsi Gabbard and the CIA, or at least our friends at the CIA, are trying to track down. They have notified me to the listeners for them to be aware that they have located 4 of the 5 documents that will be released in the coming weeks. But the point is that we also have been made aware of a whistleblower, Roger, at the CIA who actually found information that they are saying the CIA is not turning over. And so we've notified ODNI and are seeing what protections we can get in place for this whistleblower, as they're afraid, again, of, changing political tides, that, they might be okay now, but will they be charged with maybe, for example, espionage under a different administration if they come forward? So we're working through all that right now. But I do believe in the testimony that you will hear from these witnesses. Not only are they going to confirm a lot of what the American people had initially suspected, that the CIA, yes, did hide information. We actually have documentation of that now in some of these records that were released under President Trump's executive order. But also, too, there was actually some of the witnesses that are testifying today, they were silenced and stonewalled by the Warren Commission. Not to mention, they actually had the CIA, who Joanides actually was in part stonewalling some of the investigations of Congress, and you'll hear that in the testimony as well. Not to mention, we also have Dr. Don Curtis, who actually operated on Kennedy in Dallas. And many people forget when he initially was at that first hospital that they found an entry wound in his neck. Now, remember, the Warren Commission said that he was hit with a magic bullet and hit from behind. I, again, believe there are two shooters, and you'll hear that in the testimony of Dr. Don Curtis. And it's important to note that these are people that were actually at the event. You know, the left tried to say that when I presented that argument that there was more than one shooter, they tried to say that I was pushing a conspiracy theory. That is not a conspiracy theory. A lot of what you have addressed, a lot of the information currently out there today confirms that not just the mob, but I do believe there was a rogue section of the CIA that was responsible for the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and I'm not the only one. After all of the evidence has come out, people who have been there, investigators, people that worked on the Assassination Review Board, on the House Select Committee on Assassinations, all hold the same opinion. And so how do we prevent it from happening again? You know what happened with President Trump, not just once, but twice. We really haven't heard much about those assassination attempts, have we? But you have to make sure that history reflects historical accuracy, and that's exactly why this task force has been stood up. It will be one of the last hearings on John F. Kennedy in Congress, and we will also be presenting a report to the American people of these final findings and all this information for the people to review and interpret for themselves.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, and we'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back. We're talking to Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, who heads the House Task Force on the declassification of the JFK assassination records. Before the break, Congresswoman Luna said that she believed, and she's correct about this, that President Kennedy was shot by multiple shooters and shot from both the front and the back. I would point out that Paramount recently released a documentary in which they interviewed numerous doctors, surprising how many of them, I think as many as 9 doctors who attended President Kennedy at Parkland Hospital. Every one of them said they saw wounds in the president consistent with his being shot from the front and the back, and that the wound in his throat was not an exit wound, but was an entry wound. A tracheotomy was quickly performed, so by the time his body got to Bethesda Medical Center, it was impossible to say. So I think you are on the right trail. I also, as we discussed last week, if we could obtain the Nix film, that's the 8mm film by Orville Nix, an air conditioning repairman who was down on Dealey Plaza that day with a zoom lens, I think there's a high probability that that film, which the Assassination Records Review Board did look at, would prove that both of us are right. You raised another question, Congresswoman, I want to go back to. I saw your colleague, Congressman Stube from Florida, say that as a member of the Intelligence Committee, he's gotten no additional information regarding the 2 assassination attempts on President Donald Trump. I find this extraordinarily hard to believe. We are expected to believe that Thomas Matthew Crooks, alone nut, acting alone, does this sound familiar? Shot and could have killed our president. The Secret Service, the state police, the local police knew there was a man with a gun inside the perimeter of the president's event. He was seen with a rangefinder as well as a weapon for 92 minutes, but nobody informed the president's direct security detail, and he was not evacuated as would have been required by the Secret Service manual, among other things. Are you satisfied with what we're being told about these attempts, Congresswoman, and what should be done about it?
No, not at all. And in fact, when I was questioning on oversight the former Secret Service director who ended up resigning after that entire questioning of House oversight just because she knew she messed up. But she actually lied to us on the witness stand when she was up there, and we had actually found reporting from her own Secret Service agents that had stated that they were not at the actual briefing with the other local law enforcement. And so, lapsed in detail, I believe that area was left open. There was a ladder there was so much wrong with that. But then also, too, when you look at the investigation, no one goes from being a nobody, right, to all of a sudden being trained and being able to sniper. He had the perfect location. I will also say that it was interesting that he had the gaming profiles that he did, because that's typically a way, if they don't want to be tracked, that they can communicate. Not to mention there was also reports of there being burner phones as well, and yet you heard nothing about it. And remember, whenever the intelligence agencies and communities want to leak something, they'll leak it right away. So the fact that all of a sudden everyone was quiet about this and no one talks about it anymore, it's obviously scary. But he wasn't the only one, right? There was that other nut job that also tried to assassinate President Trump. So I believe that with those reports, I would hope, and I do believe that President Trump is probably internally following up. And I hope that he releases that information for the American people, because I think it's important for them to know. But, you know, I would say, Roger, if you've ever watched one of those shows like Forensic Files, you see that people will kill people for, you know, several $1,000s. If you think that they won't try to kill someone over the control of the greatest country in the world and the greatest superpower in the world, you would be sadly mistaken. And we're just glad that he's in and that he's safe. But that was a very close call. And I believe that it was honestly the hand of God that kept him alive. I genuinely believe that.
I completely believe in that. He wears the armor of God. How coincidental that they hosed out the back of JFK's limousine within an hour of his being killed. And just as they hosed down the roof of the building from which they tell us Thomas Matthew Crooks shot, as if they didn't want us to be able to check his DNA. The same intelligence services that tell us that they can't break into his encrypted phone. They don't know who else he was communicating. It boggles the mind, and history appears to me to be repeating itself. I sleep better tonight knowing that you are in the Congress and that you are going to ask these hard questions, and I salute you for the hard work and the open mind in which you are seeking the truth regarding the assassination of President John Kennedy. We haven't even gotten to Robert Kennedy yet, but what they've released there still doesn't comport with the facts as we know them. And I suspect we'll have the same problem when we get to the documents regarding Dr. King's murder as well. I want to thank you very much for joining us today on the Roger Stone Show. And where can people find you on social media?
You can find me on my official accounts at Rep Luna or my personal at Real Anna Paulina.
Very good. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Roger Stone Show. This has been a great interview.
Thanks, Roger.
All right, folks, that is it for us. I want to thank you for tuning in to the Roger Stone Show, where every Sunday we try to bring you a mix of politics, history, news, style, food, you name it. We're happy to have you on board. Until next time, God bless you and Godspeed, and God bless America.
Thanks for listening to The Roger Stone Show. You can hear The Roger Stone Show Sunday afternoons at 3. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder,
what the heck is going on here?